How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation, and in today's video, we have 3 topics to cover. Starting out with the new PS5 update says it's doing nothing, but it actually fixes a major flaw with both the PS5 and PS5 Pro. Then we're going to talk about how $80 games are officially here thanks to Microsoft and Nintendo, and I'm worried about how long Sony can hold off. And finally, Resident Evil 9 was actually announced, and I'm so excited for it. I'm a huge Resident Evil fan, so I'll tell you some things that I caught in the trailer. So yeah, let's jump into the first news story here, because over the weekend, while all the Summer Game Fest news was happening, while the Xbox Showcase was happening, while the State of Play was happening, like all this stuff was in 3 days, Sony quietly released a new update for the PlayStation 5, and they put some weird text as to what it actually fixed, like some menus would be altered or something like that, but it turns out that they actually fixed a major flaw with the PS5, and they just didn't want to say it. I don't get the optics there, because people are aware of the flaw with the PS5 and have been complaining about it for years. So like, they actually fixed it. They should let people know. If you don't know what flaw I'm talking about, it has to do with variable refresh rate. Variable refresh rate is like if your TV supports it and a game is between a threshold of frame rate. So like 48 to 60 FPS. If the frame rate drops within that range, you won't see any fluctuations because your TV will be able to sync up with the actual frame rate and match the refresh rate to the frame rate that's being outputted. So while yes, you will feel the frame drops a little bit, it won't be nearly as bad as if your TV was, say, running at 60 hertz and dropping to 48 FPS. That looks like a slowdown, a stutter, all the stuff that people hate, like me, when you're playing a game. That's what you see when you don't have variable refresh rate activated on your console and your TV. If you bought a TV within the past like 2 to 3 years, maybe even 5 years, you should have this feature, but it was flawed on both the PS5, PS5 Slim, and PS5 Pro, because it would work if you were within those ranges. So like if you were in the VRR range, everything would be fine. But if you're playing a newer game, probably a game running on Unreal Engine 5, if we're being honest, and it dropped below the threshold or went well above it, then you would see a pretty hard 1 second stutter. And the weird thing was, no matter what, you would see that stutter, but the more it happened, the more you would see the stutter. So like it would happen maybe once if the frame rate dropped below 48 FPS or whatever, and it would be a 1 second stutter. The second time it happened, it would be a longer stutter. The third time it'd be longer, fourth time, and it would compound on top of itself until you restarted the game from scratch. So it's really similar to if a game is experiencing a memory leak, I guess, where the VRAM is getting filled up and then you see the game slowing to a crawl. Regardless, it's been a major issue since the PS5 came out and got the VRR update. So Sony should have fixed it sooner, but it is really awesome that they actually took the time to fix it, because Digital Foundry has been checking in on this once a year basically since the PS5 came out, and they're the ones who confirmed that yes, this has been fixed. They reached out to Sony to confirm it, and Sony was like, yeah, we finally fixed that issue. I kind of get from one perspective why they might have wanted to hide it, mainly because it took them so long to fix it, and honestly, it's just laziness. Like, it's such a small thing to fix. This is not a problem on PC. It's not a problem on the Xbox Series X or S. It's something that they could have probably fixed in a very limited amount of time, but they just were pushing it off, putting it on the back burner, fixing other things or adding other features and let it get away from them. So I get it from that perspective, but in my opinion, it is something you could spin into great optics because it's a great thing. Like, they fixed a problem with the PS5 that people were directly complaining about. So I don't know why they hid it. They should have just put it in the patch notes for this update. And speaking of VRR, you should look at what kind of TV or monitor you have and make sure you have VRR turned on, because as far as I know, I had to turn it on both of my LG C1 OLEDs and my LG Ultra Gear monitor. LG doesn't ship with it turned on, which is weird because I don't know why you wouldn't want to use it if you did have the capability to use it. So maybe take a few minutes after watching this video and go check your TV or monitor to make sure VRR is on. It would be great if every game actually ran at 60 FPS all the time, but as we've seen over the past couple of years especially, it's kind of a pipe dream to actually get 60 FPS out of these games these days, especially if they're using Unreal Engine 5. Developers don't finish their games and they never go back and fix them. I don't know why we're in this scenario, mainly because people still buy the games anyway, is what I was going to say, but we aren't buying games. We're kind of taking a stand against this, and none of the developers are actually waking up and realizing that performance matters. So in the meantime, you should be using VRR if you have the capability to do so. But yeah, speaking of companies not listening to their fans, let's talk about $80 games and how Nintendo and Microsoft are kind of forcing Sony to start charging $80 for their games. So on Nintendo's side, the $80 game is Mario Kart World. This is the only launch title for the Nintendo Nintendo Switch 2, and you can actually get it for $50 if you buy it in a bundle with the Switch 2, but just make sure you're buying one with the sticker on the box and not Mario printed on the box, because if you get the printed one, a lot of people are reporting that the code that they're getting with the Switch 2 has already been redeemed. So that's a huge issue that Nintendo has to work out. But if they're willing to take $50 for Mario Kart World with the console, especially considering it's the only launch title, so if you're buying a Switch 2 and you want a new game that's actually going to support the Switch 2, the only option you have is the $80 Mario Kart World, they're kind of fleecing people by charging $80 to get it outside of the bundle. Honestly, they should only be selling the Switch 2 in the bundle. There shouldn't even be a $450 option. Like, they should just put the game in the box for everyone and call it $500, because selling it for $50 to some people who are buying this thing day one and selling it to $80 for others who maybe couldn't get a pre-order of the bundle, it just feels really slimy, scummy, and I don't like it at all. And on top of that, Mario Kart World is fine. Like, the open world is terrible, honestly. Like, when you drive off road, it limits you to about 2 miles an hour, which is not fun. The racetracks are very uninspired and not very good compared especially to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Like, overall, even graphically speaking, it does kind of look like a visual downgrade from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And from a content perspective, I know they did a lot of DLC for Mario Kart 8, but even the base game that Mario Kart 8 was more content rich than what I feel like Mario Kart World is. Like, on paper, there could be more content there in Mario Kart World, but like in actual practice, playing the game, it feels content light compared to how I felt about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe when I got it for the original Switch. And then you've got third-party games like Cyberpunk 2077 going for $70. I would fully expect that Elden Ring, when that comes out, will be either $60 or $70. Like, you're paying a huge tax for waiting for 5-year-old games to come to the Switch 2. So Nintendo is definitely way worse about this than Microsoft. But on the other side of the fence, at Microsoft, they announced a few games at the Xbox showcase, which is like they announced a bunch of PS5 games because that showcase was full of PlayStation 5 logos. So thanks Microsoft for that. But The Outer Worlds 2, which is a sequel to a $40 or $50 game, is one of Microsoft's first full-on $80 games. Now, to be fair, it does look like a pretty big step up from what we saw in the original Outer Worlds, but I think this is going to be a similar situation to Avowed, where the marketing is doing a lot of overtime to actually sell this game as being a lot bigger than it is, because just look at the manpower and what's being outputted over at Obsidian. On one hand, it's cool that their Xbox is Insomniac from the sense that they can make multiple games at once, right? Like, in 1 year, they're going to have Avowed, The Outer Worlds 2, and then I think Grounded 2 is entering early access. So releasing 2.5 games, because early access doesn't really count as a full launch, in 1 year is cool. But on the other hand, if they're spreading themselves that thin, I think they're going to run into the same situation they ran into with Avowed, which is that people were expecting a Skyrim-like game from Obsidian, sort of like, you know, Fallout New Vegas compared to Fallout 3, and then it turned out to be the most bare bones open world RPG ever. I think The Outer Worlds 2 will be a little more feature-rich and detailed than what we saw with Avowed, and I'd hope so, because it's the sequel and, you know, you want them to improve between games. But if people are expecting Fallout levels of game from this, I don't think that's what you're getting at all. I played The Outer Worlds to completion, and I did not like it that much. I thought I was getting a Fallout Light style game, but it has bad combat that you never really engage with, and 90% of the time that I spent playing that game was in dialogue. So, like, not really what I was looking for out of a game from Obsidian that's kind of trying to be their version of Fallout from the start. I don't see a reality in which Sony isn't forced to respond to this by starting to sell their games for $80. We've seen them make some really cool moves over the past few months, like keeping games like Death Stranding 2 and Ghost of Yotei at $70. That's awesome. And of course, they discounted the PS5 and PS5 Pro while Xbox and Nintendo are charging people out the ass for their consoles. That's also awesome, but they have investors. They're a public company. And if the investors see the other companies and corporations charging $80 for their games and actually selling copies, and they're going to say, well, you know, we're invested in you to make money. Your goal is to make us money. Your obligation is to make shareholders and investors money and screw over your customers to do so. And your competition is doing doing that and they're making money. So if you have the opportunity to sell games for $80 and still sell them, that's exactly what you should be doing. And if you want to see some precedent for that, look up the court case where Dodge literally sued, I think, Ford for trying to treat their employees better. They said, no, the obligation of a corporation is to the shareholders, not the customer. So there's court cases that kind of back this up. And look at the completely unnecessary revamp of PS Plus, where, you know, there's extra and premium for no reason outside of the fact that investors saw Microsoft making money and said Sony better have something to compete with that. Same thing for charging for online access. Their obligation is always going to be to the shareholders. So if one company is doing something, they're eventually going to have to do it too. So the 2025 games, I think we're safe with $70, but I think once 2026 hits, that's when we're going to start to see $80 games from Sony. They better come prepared, man. They better not have any bugs. They better not have any frame rate drops. They better be content complete at launch, or there's going to be anarchy from people, and it is well deserved. This is getting ridiculous. The quality level of games is totally out of sync with the cost of games on both fronts, like the budgets and the actual MSRP of games. Like, we are going to hit a breaking point, and that's going to result in more layoffs, more problems, and more just crap we don't want to deal with in the world of entertainment, aka playing video games. But yeah, speaking of new games, let's talk about Resident Evil 9 Requiem. I am so excited. This has been long rumored. It's been rumored that it's going to star Leon. I'm excited for that. I think they're doing a little trickery by saying that it's not going to star Leon. They're putting a different character on the cover. We'll wait and see. I mean, it's just announced. There's still details to come out. This was announced, though, in the most bizarre way possible. They had that little clip in the middle of Summer Game Fest where they were like, hey, it's the 30th anniversary of Resident Evil. Give us a little more time before we announce Resident Evil 9, and everyone was mad. And then at the end of the show, they play the trailer for Resident Evil 9. Like, I don't know if that was a bit or a joke or what. It did not land at all, but I'm still very excited about this trailer because they've been cooking on this game for a long time. I mean, Resident Evil Village, I think either came out in 2020 or 2021, so it's been a few years. They were on a great cadence after Resident Evil 7, where it went 7, 2 remake, Village, 3 remake, 4 remake, then nothing for a while. So clearly it's all hands on deck for Resident Evil 9 Requiem. And based on what we've seen, the wait is going to be worth it. So the first big thing is that the new playable character is the daughter of one of the characters from Resident Evil Outbreak. Like, you guys know, I've played basically every Resident Evil game, but the only 3 I haven't played are the Game Boy one. I think it's called Resident Evil Gaiden. I own it. I just haven't played it. Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak 2, and Resident Evil Dead Aim, which is like the first person shooter game for the PlayStation 1. I never played that one, but outside of that, I'm 99% certain I've played every Resident Evil game. And if I had to rank my favorite series, it's probably my favorite series of all time. My favorite story thread in Resident Evil obviously is Leon's. 2, 4, he's the best. I like the shows in Dead Island with him. He's just the best character. He's like my favorite since I was a little kid. I love Leon. And the whole vibe is just that they're wrapping up the plot line of Resident Evil. Now, this was supposed to happen back with RE6, like they were teasing that as sort of like the Avengers Endgame, where you're going to get Chris, Leon, Jill, everyone kind of on board together to have one big showdown against a final boss, Albert Wesker. So I'm like assuming this isn't the end of Resident Evil as a whole, but clearly they're doing some crazy stuff by showing the blown up version of Raccoon City. Now, they're being a little weird about that. Like, they dropped a nuke on the city and it looks like about 99% of it is intact. So maybe they dropped it on the mansion and then the fallout kind of hit the city. I don't really know. But, you know, they blew up the city and they showed the RPD in its dilapidated state. They're teasing that you're going to go back to the RPD, and that hooded figure, people lined up its face side by side with Leon over the weekend, and it looks like Leon. Now, I really hope 2 things don't happen. The first thing I hope doesn't happen is that he's hooded for 90% of the game, like Jill was in Resident Evil 5. That was kind of dumb. I didn't like that. I don't like seeing these hero characters kind of turned into bad guys. I think that's a played out trope. And like, if this really is Leon's last game, I don't want to be chasing him as the villain for half the game. I want to play as him. The Ashcroft girl looks awesome. I think she's going to be a great character. I love Jill. I love Rebecca. I love all the like women of Resident Evil, like Claire and everyone. I think they do a great job with those characters. But like, if Leon's in the game, I want to play as Leon. The second thing that I think they could do that I really hope they don't do is kill Leon. I get it. Like, you know, you want to have some finality to these stories. series, the stakes are high, but like, how many characters have died in Resident Evil or any property? And then, you know, when the sales slump and they need to do something big, they come back. It's like Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Dr. Doom in Marvel. It's like, oh, the MCU is dying. Let's bring back Robert Downey Jr. That's what happens when you kill characters like Leon. And if it, like, we waited so long for this, I'm not counting the remake of Resident Evil 4. It's been literal decades since Leon actually starred in a new game that's not a remake. So like bringing him back, having you not play as him for more than a few minutes in the game and then also killing him, that would not be good. I am kind of bummed that this is wrapping up the Resident Evil 7 trilogy and they're changing the naming structure. So like they hid the 7 in Resident Evil Biohazard, and then for Village it was VIII because, you know, VILL is like VIII, so 8. And then 9, I guess the Q in Requiem is like a regular 9, kind of like it flashes a couple times in the trailer. I get the vibe they're going for, and it doesn't really ultimately matter at the end of the day. It just screws with my brain a little bit. I'm just not the biggest fan in the pantheon of Resident Evil Village. Like, it's still one of my favorite games. I just don't like it as much as the other Resident Evils. If I had to rank the top 3, it would be RE4, RE7, RE2 Remake. Those are my 3 favorites. I think if I'm ranking them as horror games, Resident Evil 7 is the best. I think like they killed it by making that this like Evil Dead Texas Chainsaw inspired thing that takes place in Louisiana, and then people bitched and moaned and said, oh, it's too scary. It's my horror game. It's too scary. So then they made it like an action game for Village, kind of lost what I loved about 7. And I just don't like the kind of new fandom that Village generated where they treat it like an aesthetic, you know, it's like Hot Topic style where like they want it on t-shirts. They want these memes where you're like shipping Leon and Chris, and like, I like this series. I think it's cool on its own and it doesn't need to be turned into like a big joke to have a fandom around it. Like it did just fine before these people showed up and turned it into like a Tumblr thing. So I just don't like that. So to see Resident Evil 9 going back to the Resident Evil 7 style where like the art has a zombie with like blood dripping out of his teeth, it's like acid washed, the text is typewriter text, you're going back to Raccoon City, it's going for psychological terror, they're really hyping up the horror angle of it. That's obviously speaking to me, and I just hope it actually lives up to that, because before Resident Evil Village came out, they were like, this is the scariest one yet. And then once it came out and everyone realized it was an action game, they were like, well, yeah, people were too scared of 7. They're just too big babies. So like we changed it. Stop listening to your new fans and go back to listening to your original fans who want survival horror. And it looks like they're doing that. We don't have long to wait for it either. It's coming out February 26th. I just hope to God it does not continue the trend that Capcom has had this generation with both Dragon's Dogma 2 and Monster Hunter Wilds, where they both use RE engine but run like shit. Dragon's Dogma 2 still has performance problems and Monster Hunter Wilds is a mess. So like Resident Evil so far has been one of the most consistently easy to run games on PS5 and PC. Like the PS5 Pro can run RE4 at 120 FPS at 4K. And it looks awesome. So keep those graphics, but keep that performance as well. Until it's out, I'm not going to be able to breathe, right? Like until I know if I'm playing as Leon, until I know if it's actually going for horror, until I know if it runs good. There's just so many things based on the past few years of games that can go wrong. I feel like my hype is going to hit once I'm sitting down on my couch with the controller in hand, and then I'm going to be like, oh shit, I'm playing a new Resident Evil game, you know? But just like, you got to be cautious these days. And this is my baby. I don't want to see it screwed up. But yeah, there's your gush fest from me, the biggest Resident Evil fan in the world. I hope you're excited because I'm excited. I'm just cautiously optimistic. You know, you got to have a little bit of skepticism with these devs these days. Anyway, guys, as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.